All right.
Congratulations, but you have the floor.
All right, thanks. Cool. All right, hey everyone, super excited to be here and chat about site reliability, engineering, and service level objectives with you all. Let's go ahead and just get into it. So, who am I? I'm Dan Sepich. I am currently a director of enterprise reliability solutions at Noble 9. So basically what that means is I get to work with organizations globally to help them build their SLO programs and mature their SRE practices. So I see quite a bit in terms of the reality of scaling SRE practice at large enterprises and companies of all kinds of different types, whether that's from the financial space or streaming platforms to pizza shops to all kinds of different use cases. So if you have any interest in picking my brain, I see quite a bit. So feel free to hit me up anytime to talk about this stuff. But Noble 9, just really quick, just so you know, it's a service level objective management platform. It's the only platform on the market that is solely focused on SLO management as a platform. So you'll see like SLO capabilities bolted onto the side of observability platforms like Dynatrace or Datadog or Grafana or things like that. But we are all in on enabling SLOs at scale for enterprise. So prior to joining Noble 9 though, I worked at Principal for the majority of my career. I've been at Noble 9 for 2 years now. When I had left, I helped build out their SRE function and led the observability and kind of SLO program over there. And prior to that, I was leading various teams supporting critical application hosting infrastructure. And prior to that, I pretty much grew up in ops, carrying the pager. So I have a lot of experience, navigating the real world of enterprise hosting, critical application hosting infrastructure, from API gateway infrastructure to, Java infrastructure to web layer stuff, all kinds of different stuff. Can't keep track of it all anymore. Outside of work, I'm on dad mode. Those of you that have kids know that you don't have a lot of time outside of work to do a whole lot. So dad mode is my, second job, and I like to see how far I can run. That's kind of one of my hobbies. And then I'm probably just building something around the house. So yeah, so let's get into this a little bit. So I do want to kick off, just kind of laying the foundation. Let's talk about the tone here. There are 3 fundamental truths when it comes to reliability, and I actually stole this from my colleague Alex Hidalgo, who wrote the SLO book. It's the O'Reilly book. Check it out if you haven't, if you really want to go deep into SLO concepts. But first, let's just talk about this. So first and foremost, reliability is the most important feature of your service, right? You can have the best product organization, deploy all the bells and whistles, but if the features are not doing what the users expect in terms of reliability, then all that is wasted, right? So, I mean, we're really sensitive to this stuff today, right? Like when you go doom scroll on Instagram, if it's like 5 seconds slow, you're frustrated. Right, so reliability is top of mind for all of our customers. Number 2, your users determine what reliability means, actually, if you didn't know that. There's so much noise, around your observability platforms and proprietary shenanigans going on, telling you how performant your applications are. But none of that really matters if you aren't, identifying the key signals that your users actually care about. So when you hit checkout in an e-commerce platform or something, sure, like maybe your observability platforms emit metrics and do AI analysis and event management and all that kind of stuff, right? But how do you actually know that that's what the user cares about? SLOs help bridge that gap, and I'll get into that a little bit here. And we're all in tech. We know this. Nothing works all the time. So if you're aiming for perfection, you're gonna have a bad day, right? If you're responding to all the blips and all the noise, you're never gonna get anything done. So nothing works all the time, so don't aim for it. Service level objectives help you set reasonable targets about how reliable your services should actually be. Okay, so let's get into the fun. So I want to talk a little bit about how most enterprises manage reliability today. And I'm not targeting any specific, I just want to call out, I'm not targeting any specific enterprises or companies or anything like that when I talk about this stuff. I've just seen a lot over the last couple of years, and I've worked in enterprise, and these are, let's just say, these are themes that I have identified. So first and foremost, teams tend to optimize response instead of prevention when it comes to reliability, right? And then incident management becomes the operating model of the reliability framework. Okay, so let's get into this a little bit. Let's break it down. So severity definitions tend to define incidents, right? Is everybody in here familiar with severity definitions? Okay. So like your Sev 1s, your Sev 2s, your P1s, whatever your organization calls them. The problem with severity definitions is they tend to live in a Confluence site somewhere collecting dust like the rest of your Confluence pages, right? So, you know, I could go down huge rabbit holes on the flaws of severity definitions, but I'll save you from that. If you want resources on that, glad to share. But the big theme is severity definitions are typically, you know, they're out of date, they're not updated, and they're very subjective in nature. It's not always clear on what a Sev 1 actually is. That actually ties back to alerting and things like that. So let's keep unpacking this a little bit. So severity definitions, they drive incidents, and incidents drive availability, right? And availability tends to be the percentage of time you weren't in a Sev 1 or a P1 last month or quarter, or however you measure that. And remember, Sev 1s, P1s, those are defined by severity definitions, and alerts are rarely actually in sync with your severity definitions, which is its own kind of problem in of itself. And sometimes your customers are your alerts, and I see this in practice. I would talk to lots of customer or, you know, prospects and enterprises and SRE teams, and this is a reality today still. Like, people wait for customers to tell them that their things are broken, and then they declare incidents and Sev 1s, and that's how they measure availability of their services, okay? So then the conversation becomes, how do we improve availability? And the answer to that is, well, we fix incidents faster, right? So how do we know we are fixing incidents faster? Does anybody have a guess of what I'm about to say? What's a very common metric that's used to determine how fast incidents are? It's MTTR. So mean time to resolve is the North Star of enterprise reliability strategy. Straight up, I'm telling you, it's what I see. All right, so let's just talk about MTTR for a minute. I could do a whole talk on this, and if you want papers or conference talks or whatever, hit me up and I can send you all the things. Let's use this as an example. So let's assume in Q1 you have 20 incidents and it totals 120 minutes of unreliability. In Q2 you have 10 incidents totaling 150 minutes of unreliability. Q1, your MTTR is 6 minutes. In Q2, your MTTR is 15 minutes. Q2 was not more than twice as bad as Q1. Are we mathing? Does that make sense? So when you're using MTTR as your North Star of reliability, it's not actually even calculating reliability. It's calculating means, which has its flaws, right? So I wasn't going to include this slide, but I couldn't resist. And what I see is managing MTTR is typically a pain in the ass as well, right? And everybody does it differently. So MTTR numbers tend to need to roll up to some sort of application. What's an application in the enterprise context? How is that defined? Typically, there's some sort of application inventory, which tends to depend on a CMDB being accurate, and that depends on an ITSM platform being involved in some scenario, which has probably been rolled out, being rolled out for the last few years. So I see a tremendous amount of effort trying to manually hack all this stuff together to define what MTTR even means, to be able to report on it to the business, because the execs and the VPs, they want to speak the language of the business, and there's a disconnect between everyone, right? And then all of this tends to be a complex mess. So that's what I'm seeing. So let's just kind of keep going here. Most enterprises tend to have a Gartner, Magic Quadrant leading observability platform. They have terabytes of logs, metrics, and traces. They have an incident management platform like ServiceNow or Rootly or Incident.io or something like that. a paging platform like PagerDuty or Xmatters. And then you're starting to see things like AI ops kind of come up to help try to manage the complexity of all the noise that's emitted from all of these things. And now there's even SRE agents that help you solve these problems too, right? And we're chucking money at this stuff, right? And the thing is I'm not saying that we don't need all of those things. Like, all of those things are actually needed. Like, we do need strong telemetry, and we need performance data, we need incident management. But the problem is there's a significant investment in it, but there's actually no real definition of reliability. And there's not a good framework to measure reliability and drive conversations around reliability. It's all focused on incident management, which kind of, yeah, you guys probably feel that. So how did we get here? I would say ITSM and operational process culture often overrides SRE ambitions at a lot of enterprises. That's one theme. Another, pockets of SRE practices is easy for the motivated, right? You'll see pockets of SLO adoption, you'll see pockets of some of that going on, but actually scaling that across an enterprise is a whole other ballgame, right? Maybe SRE does not yet exist at all within your company, or if they do exist, they don't really have enough support yet to make things happen. Or, DORA metrics contribute to this because MTTR, right? It's a DORA metric. So I put this post up a few months ago because I feel this a lot. I feel it in the prospects and my customers and my previous teams. And there's a big theme here, right? SRE needs a seat at the table right alongside security, platform, architecture, and without executive alignment on this, SRE practices will feel optional to your organization. And we all know when anything is optional in an enterprise, it doesn't scale, never. I don't care what it is. So when reliability is optional, incident response becomes the main focus because fires always get attention, right? So modern SRE, it's not just a team rebrand or a tooling initiative. It should be an operating model for managing reliability as a business capability. You should have top-down support from the execs, from the CTOs to manage reliability through SRE foundations, which SLOs live at the bottom of that, right? So simply put, I'm gonna say this as simply as I can. SLOs are the foundation of SRE. And all I'm saying here is we should set targets for how reliable our services should be. We should measure if we hit those targets, and we should do something if those targets are at risk or missed. Like, that's really SLOs in a nutshell, okay? So instead of saying how much better were we at resolving incidents last quarter, the conversation should shift to, did we meet our reliability goals, right? So I feel like I'm bashing on incident management a little bit. So I just want to call out, incident management is important, but it is one of the many moving pieces to delivering a reliable platform or a service, right? It's just one piece. There's so many different contributing factors that drive the reliability. And if you're just focused on incident management as your reliability North Star and strategy, yeah, that's a problem. So really quick, what are SLOs? In case you're not aware, don't worry, I'm not gonna bore you too much with this. It'll just take me a minute. SLIs is just the measurement that you're using to define how the service is operating. And ideally, this is being measured from the user's perspective, and it's typically calculated from logs, metrics, or traces. And then you have your SLO, which is the target. That's it. It's just the target for how reliable your service should be. Again, nothing is 100% reliable, so an SLO lets you pick a reasonable target. And then my favorite concept, the error budget. How much failure can you actually tolerate? That's a shift in thinking for a lot of people, but it's a very refreshing way to think about managing the reliability of your service. So if you say you have a 3 nines SLO, that means you're tolerating 0.1% of failure over a time frame, like a 28-day rolling window, for example. And you can translate that to minutes too, like, hey, over the next 28 days, we're gonna tolerate 43 minutes of bad, of downtime, or whatever you wanna call it, of reliability. which is really interesting because sometimes when you tell a VP that you're going to have 42 minutes of downtime a month, they have no idea that that actually means 99.9% reliability. And I can tell you, very, very rarely is anybody 99.9% when you actually measure the reliability of services using real data and not incident management. I mean, you could be completely in the green if no Sev1s are deployed for an entire quarter, right? But as soon as you start managing reliability through SLOs, yeah, the truth comes out pretty quick in terms of how reliable your services are. And then I'll just hit on SLA really quick because it comes up in so many conversations I'm in. An SLA is different than an SLO. It generally implies that something is owed to someone. It's used for, in use cases where users are paying for a service. I will say in practice, this comes up a lot with our customers in the use case of the business typically does have some sort of SLA connection to business partners, and they are really bad at measuring adherence to their SLAs. Like the business defines it, and there's usually a big disconnect between engineering and what an SLA promise is from the business. So there's a massive, let's say, desire to use SLOs to prove SLA adherence, which I think is going to continue to get more traction as SLOs become more mainstream over the coming years. Real quick, what is a service? When we say service level objectives, I would just say that's anything that provides functionality to another service or user. You could think of that as an API. You could say the service is our checkout service. It's a landing page. It's SSO. It could be those types of things. And then a user, it's anything that's using your service. It could be the end customer, but it could also be internally shared, services that are consumed by other services that are consumed by other services, right? So it all kind of depends on what a service or a service and a user are. Sorry if I flip-flop those a little bit. All right, let's talk about availability versus reliability. I would say most people, when they're talking about reliability, they tend to say availability in a lot of enterprises. And availability has it's just a very loaded term. It could mean a lot of stuff, right? And I think what the SRE community is trying to do is be a little more precise in what reliability actually means. So let me this is the best example I've heard, and I think it resonated with the community. So availability is where you order a steak and your waiter brings you a hot dog 30 minutes later, right? Like it was up, but you didn't get what you wanted. But reliability, on the other hand, would be you ordered the steak and it's cooked at the doneness that you wanted and it's delivered in a reasonable amount of time. Like that's kind of how you could think about the difference between availability and reliability concepts. So if we're talking about like an API, for example, you could say the API is up, but for availability, but for reliability, you would say the availability or the API is up, it returns to XX's, and it responds in 200 milliseconds. And you could even take this as far as availability means customers aren't complaining. Like that is the culture and the reality again for many businesses. And yeah, you get it. So let's see, what do we got next? This is just a more kind of diagrammed way of thinking through this. So you have a web API, you care about the availability. You can check to see if it's available, but what if the responses are slow, right? So then you can check, and these are things that you can put SLOs on, right? You can check, is the service responsive? You can confirm that it's responsive, but what if it's actually returning bad error codes? Like availability and errors can be different in terms of how you measure those things. So you might want to check for errors. So this is a framework that is just like if you do this for all of your critical services at an enterprise, you're going to have a way better reliability posture than just leaning on severity definitions and incidents as your main North Star. I call this AIL, if that helps you remember this, availability, latency, errors. It's kind of a spin-off of Valet, which is a Google thing, I think. So yeah. So simply put, if your services are meeting SLO targets, you're going to have happy users. And if you're missing your SLO targets, you're going to have sad users. All right. So let's get into some more practical examples because I know some of us are nerds in here and we want to see this stuff. How does this actually look in practice? So what does this tell us, right? This is a time series chart. We have a threshold right there of like 450 milliseconds, let's call it. And then this is the performance of, let's say, an API. We're humming along fine here, and then we're starting to creep up on the threshold, and maybe we're even blipping above it a bit, right? In a traditional monitoring practice, you probably have some threshold-based alerting that's creating noise, and you might have an inbox or a folder in your inbox that you're sending all that noise to. Like, that's the reality of some of that. Or maybe you have an operations crew that's trying to triage that, or you're buying event management platforms to try to manage all the noise. And then down here, something bad happened, and things are really bad. I don't know why we're letting things go on for so long, but things got really bad there. So let's look at this with an SLO on it, right? So this is an example of an SLO that says the response time of 99% of API requests should be faster than 450 milliseconds over a 28-day rolling window. So this chart up here is your error budget, essentially. We call it the reliability burn down, but this is a 99% target. So as soon as you violate that 99% target, that means you have exhausted your error budget. So this is a way different way of looking at this data, right? You're setting an intentional target. You're saying how fast the requests need to be. And then you're going to do something based off this, right? And there's lots of different things you can do. And I'll get into this in a little bit more depth here shortly. But what if you get alerted right here, right? And you're trending at a rate that's going to violate your error budget. You can put alert policies in place that alert on that kind of stuff. What if you create a JIRA ticket when you're like 20% away from violating your error budget to prioritize reliability work instead of just letting your service slowly degrade and have reliability drift over time? Here's another example of that. And I think this is a nice example of reliability drift. Like this SLI down here is blipping above the threshold pretty frequently. And we see that in practice, especially with latency. Like things just happen. There are dependencies and complexity. So you have blips that are happening over that threshold all the time. You're going to draw the line somewhere on that. You got to think about like how much of that am I really actually willing to tolerate? And that's what the SLO unlocks for you, because you can see like we're burning down error budget slowly but surely, but we don't violate it till way out here. But that should be a trigger to say something's brewing here, let's take care of it. So it doesn't just continue to be tech debt or reliability drift or whatever you want to call it, right? So I do want to talk a little bit about what happens when you scale SLOs. So first and foremost, you're putting the customer at the center of your reliability strategy. Ideally, your SLOs, again, they represent what your users are experiencing when they're consuming your service. So there's a lot of wins in the nature of that. But one of the most interesting things that I see in practice is it really encourages cross-team iteration and discussion. You know, a lot of SRE is about people, talking with people about performance, about what it takes to manage a reliable service. So a lot of the customers that I work with and a lot of SRE practices will actually start measuring SLOs at the kind of top of the call chain, you know, typically close to the customer experience as you can get, whether that's an API gateway or a load balancer all the way up to client-side telemetry like RUM metrics. It just kind of depends on the maturity of the observability strategy at a lot of enterprises where they can get with that. But a lot of the time you're aiming at the end user, like the person that's going to check their bank balance, like what are they experiencing? So when you start measuring the reliability of this stuff, what happens is you're typically not as reliable as you thought you were, first off, which is always fun. But it also enables you to actually have productive conversations about the weakest links in the chain. So you can go to your dependencies or the service owners that you're dependent on and talk to them about, we have these requirements, what's it gonna take for you to be this reliable so we can be that reliable. Without a framework to do that, you're kind of, again, using incidents or, you know, big outages fueled by VPs, kind of, you know, getting you to do things to actually have those conversations. But if you have a buy-in for SLOs as the framework for how you measure reliability, these conversations get a lot easier. And, you know, it empowers teams to focus on what matters. Like if you read the Google SRE books, there's a big theme around SLOs are used to essentially block deployments if you have violated your air budget. Like you cannot go to production with new releases if you have violated your air budget, and you have to wait for your air budget to recover. Glad to talk offline about what I see in practice when it comes to that stuff. But the whole point is it allows you to intentionally prioritize reliability work, whether that's blocking deployments or not. I'll show you some more examples of that. And I know some harness guys are in here, so I'm curious what you guys see. But it helps you focus on what matters. It helps you prioritize reliability work. So the idea is focus on deploying features if you're within air budget, and then if you get at risk of violating your air budget, then prioritize reliability work. This is another interesting one. Measures the success of reliability investments. I think it was SRECon like 3 years ago. The opening keynote was the success in SRE is silent. And I think there's a theme here around it. It's difficult sometimes to measure the ROI of reliability strategy in general. It's really easy when you have a big incident and there was like $3 million lost and everybody freaks out and they're like, make sure that doesn't happen again. But when it comes to are we doing all the things that we should be doing so that doesn't happen, or we're mitigating that risk to the best of our ability, it's really easy. It's like, all right, we have all these targets for our SLOs. Are we meeting those targets or not? If you're not meeting those targets, then maybe you're not successful and you should do something about it. So that's a way you can measure the success of your reliability investments. And then just the nature of them, you're having more conversations, you're being more proactive about reliability, you're talking about the key signals, you're not always just reacting to reliability problems. Cool. So what we're doing here, and this is something I in really starting to realize after being in this space for a while, is there are lots of personas involved in a reliability program. And what we're really doing is we're trying to enable an operating model around this stuff, especially when we think about enterprise scale. Again, like if you're, if you have a small company and you're managing a small set of services, this is a little less important, but the reality is when it comes to enterprises, there needs to be a bit more of an operating model. So this is what I see, right? I have 3 pillars here I've tried to articulate. First, you have people that own the SLOs, right? Those are the engineering teams and ideally the product people. So the engineering teams, they should have an idea of what those signals are. They should know what their product is, right? So they should be able to own these SLO definitions. And then, yes, I am going to use the G word, govern, as this pillar, because the reality is if you aren't putting in some level of governance and policy in enterprises, nothing ever gets done. So you have to have someone kind of set the standard. You got to get buy-in on that standard. So typically some sort of central SRE team or observability team or whatever you want to call them, they need to own the standards, and they need to own the SLO program like a product. They need to try to reduce as much friction around adopting the SLO standards as possible. And ideally, you're in alignment with enterprise architecture because they tend to have visibility into the tech landscape and the entire ecosystem. So you make sure you're aligned with how they're delivering similar production operational standards. So that's a big factor in this. And then this is where the value starts coming in, is you're using the feedback. You're using SLOs to make decisions. Engineering teams can prioritize reliability work. Engineering leaders can manage the trade-offs and the resourcing. Incident managers know they live and breathe incidents, so they can use SLOs to understand impact and navigate postmortems. Then you have product, and then executives. And executives, I'll tell you right now, they love SLOs. They love the idea of them, at least. So being able to roll up SLOs and tell stories with SLOs is something that every single executive nods their head at and says they want, and they invest in it. So let's talk a little bit more about SLOs for decision making. And what I'm really trying to get at here is SLOs are not meant to be just another dashboard or metric in your stack, right? If you are sitting there, first off, if you're sitting there staring at observability dashboards all day, you're doing your job wrong. I'm just telling you, you need to have mechanisms and feedback loops in place to let you know when to take action on things, and you should be spending efforts on improving business value, right? So let's talk through a few examples of how you can use SLOs to make decisions. So first, Prioritizing reliability work. Again, this kind of goes back to the example from before, but you can put alert policies when you're about ready to violate air budgets, and you can open tickets, and then you can work on those tickets. Like, it's not that hard. It's really pretty straightforward to do. And you can scale this. You can put enterprise policies in place to scale this, and I have seen it done in practice with success. So maybe you do that at like 20% or when the air budget is violated. And have teams the whole point is to give teams space to focus on reliability. It's a top-down supported standard, like, hey, if you violate an air budget, you need to see why. So they open up their observability platforms, and maybe they figure out why, maybe they don't. And if they don't, that's a win in disguise, because that means they're flying blind to reliability and they need to fill that observability gap, right? There's lots of wins behind that. It could be as simple as you have a sprint planning session or an operational review of sorts. Just pull up your SLOs and look at them. Like, maybe sort them by the least performing ones and talk about what's happening there and decide if you want to prioritize your reliability work off of them. Alerting. SLO-based alerting, it can be a little intimidating. There's lots of different ways to do it. But there's burn rate-based alerting, there's air budget drop-based alerting, when you violate your air budget-based alerting, there's all kinds of different strategies to this. But when you hone in SLO-based alerting, the vision is you are not doing threshold-based traditional monitoring. You're alerting based off the rate your air budget is being burned, which puts your service at risk for missing your SLO target, which is a whole different way of thinking about alerting altogether. So highly recommend exploring SLO-based alerting if you haven't looked into it yet. And if you want to talk more about that, just hit me up. And then reporting gets really interesting. All these screenshots are from Noble 9 because I live and breathe in it, obviously. But if you are able to start reporting on SLOs, things get really powerful because you can create flexibility and dynamic reports that align to different personas. So you can create roll-up reports for an entire enterprise, or a user journey, or a product line, or just your engineering team. And you can get that in front of the right people so they can help you prioritize the right things to improve reliability. Real-time impact. If SLOs are the best signals you have that represent what customers are experiencing, imagine an AWS East region goes down or something. You can just pull up all your SLOs and see what's impacted instead of waiting for the war room to start, or the Teams meeting, or the event notification, or maybe some other dashboards you have that are time series based that don't really tell you what's actually broken. Even like using status page stuff for SLOs, it starts to get really powerful. Release gates. Like I was saying earlier, Google talks a lot about blocking deployments on release. I'm going to use the G word again, but if you have some level of governance in place on SLO standards, there's a whole other play with requiring certain SLOs before you can even go to production, right? So, hey, you're going to production and you are not measuring the reliability of it in alignment with the SRE standard set by the enterprise. Maybe you can't deploy, or maybe we're going to give you resources on how to build your SLOs real quick, or maybe it's optional. You can kind of tiptoe into that. It all depends on your culture and how much support you have around. Release gates are sensitive, I know, okay. So yeah, but there's a lot of buzz around using SLOs for telling user journey stories. Like, how many of you guys have like key user journeys at your enterprise? Are those like defined by the business or marketing? You guys ever hear about user journeys? Okay, nobody's saying anything. Yes. Okay. So the reality that what I'm seeing, what's really cool about using SLOs for user journeys, especially in large companies, is the user journey is made up of many different teams and many different technologies and many different telemetry sources sometimes. So if you have SLOs centralized, you can start piecing those together, put them together into composite SLOs or reports. This is an example of a composite SLO. And you can actually see like what is the least reliable service driving down a user journey. So say single sign-on to a landing page to checking a 401k balance. Like what does that look like? Where's the slowness? What are our targets for those things? And that's how I'm seeing a lot of organizations start with their SLO programs. They'll map out the user journey and they fill in the gaps on their SLOs on those journeys. So that's an approach that can get ROI and visibility very, very quickly if you approach your SLO strategy with a user journey-based approach. And postmortems, like just, you already have the list in ServiceNow of the things you ask during a postmortem. Just ask, did your SLOs catch the incident? Yes, good. If you didn't violate your error budget, let's not even assign you follow-up tasks. Let's not waste time on it. You're still meeting your reliability targets. Maybe we actually don't even need this meeting in the first place, right? If no, like go add SLOs or go improve your SLOs. Gain confidence in your SLOs so it doesn't happen again, right? And this is my last topic. I couldn't not bring up AI in this, right? So, gosh, duh, yeah, AI is increasing system complexity, right? It's accelerating code generation, infrastructure changes, deployment velocity, and service sprawl. And the result is more dependencies, more hidden failure modes, and harder debugging, right? Yeah, so the whole idea is if you start building your SLO-based operating model now, SLOs are your feedback loop. How else are you going to know that your services in production are meeting, reliability targets and those expectations of your customers? So SLOs are going to help us decide whether what we built is reliable enough. So if you start laying that foundation now, I can't think of a better time than now to start measuring the reliability as AI increases velocity. And I know there's a lot of DevOpsers in here. I would love to kind of hear your thoughts on how AI is starting to shape DORA metrics and things like that going forward. That'd be kind of an interesting topic. So at the end of the day, just remember SLOs and error budgets, they're going to give you better data to have better discussions, to make better decisions. That's what I got. Thank you, guys. Any questions?
For the customers that you've seen do this really well, like the more mature, more advanced ones, just kind of curious to pick your brain on like what were some of the success factors or factors that made them successful. I have to assume like observability, maturity has got to be one of them, right? But what other things made them really successful in adopting these types of programs?
Yeah, I would say the number one, honestly, is top-down support. Like sometimes we'll see organizations bring in an SLO program and it's too tucked away and it'll fizzle out a little bit. So that's why I used the G word earlier, governance. If you have top-down support and policies and you're in alignment with other operational production standards like security, those are the enterprises that scale SLOs successfully by far. But if it's kind of brought in like by middle management in a pocket somewhere and they're trying to influence up, sometimes that can be a challenge. Not to say there can't be pockets of success, but when I'm talking true scale, you really need that support. Maria.
That isn't surprising to me. I don't know why it isn't surprising to me, but that's interesting because as DevOpsDSM, I remember there's a DORA report that said the ones that are most successful are middle management run. And what is something that you could maybe think of that would be the difference between the two there?
Yeah, so like I said, if it's middle management run and the scope is what's under them, it's very successful because they are passionate about it, they're motivated, they make it happen. So I think the context I was coming from was scale. Multiple business units, different companies that get acquired that have their own things going on. It gets difficult to scale things unless you have more like CTO level, CIO level support, usually. That was kind of the context. Todd, you also said observability maturity. It's definitely a factor. Observability maturity also tends to go alongside SRE maturity in general. Like if you have extremely immature or outdated observability platforms or you're just slinging agents and not doing anything about it, you're probably not going to be looking to do SLOs. Not to say that's not always the case, but the key thing is if you do bring in SLOs, they can actually help you drive your observability strategy too, because you go to measure the things you want to measure and you realize you can't because you don't have the observability data. Or maybe you start basic, you start with what you have with very basic metrics that you're using today to declare sub ones. That's a great way to start with this stuff. But then you can start telling the story of our customers are complaining, but our observability ain't catching it, and our SLOs aren't. It all kind of goes together. So that's what I see.
I assume they would also be using Noble 9.
Yeah. Yeah. The nice thing about Noble 9 plug is it integrates with all of the big observability platforms. So a lot of big enterprises have multiple telemetry sources across their logs, metrics, and traces. So being able to pull that together and normalize your reliability calculations, reports, and all that stuff, drive decisions, that's our play for sure. So what else, guys? Yes. Typically, they're separate SLOs. Like you'll have an availability SLO, and in practice, like that could be a synthetic, or and then you might have a latency SLO, and then you might have an error rate based SLO or success rate based SLO. If we're talking about those ones I was just talking about, like the ALE, and those are all different metrics that are typically out of the box, maybe not synthetics. You kind of have to build those usually. But what's really funny? I see a lot of enterprises. When they do SLOs, they measure error rate and success rate, and I ask them what happens if the service is completely down and you don't have error rate and success rate making it to your telemetry source at all. How do you know it's up? And they're like, oh, yeah, I feel like that would be a common thing that you would want to know. But yeah, so that's why I like to say availability is kind of a separate thing versus success rate. Because like if you're measuring at a load balancer or something like that, it can be hard to capture. Straight up is the thing up or down, silly enough. But there's lots of other metrics you can use for SLOs, like throughput and saturation and things like that. But quite honestly, ALE are the most common ones I see. Yes?
So one of the things that you had talked about is incident command and like them owning some metrics. My experience is that incident command loves SLOs. They don't want to do MTTR themselves. Is that your experience?
Depends on the enterprise. Sometimes, just like anything, culture and political dynamics and how long people have been doing things a certain way can be a factor, and they can get married to their ideas. And SRE transformation is a different way of thinking about managing reliability. So yes, like I've had customers and I've worked with prospects and other people in the field where it is incident management bringing in the SLO program, and that tends to be exciting. But I'd rather it be SRE over incident management with top-down support. Like that's the ideal model, in my opinion. Like sometimes I see, and I think over the next few years we're going to see more maturity of SRE in enterprises where SRE runs incident management. They're not side by side, or SRE isn't underneath incident management. SRE propagates the strategy into incident management strategy. But if incident management is driving SRE practices, there tends to be problems there from what I've seen in practice. Depends on who you have in there. You know what I mean? Like some organizations are very strategic and they hire really good incident commanders that are SRE focused, and they can really help steer a lot of change there too. So it really depends on the company. What are you guys seeing in practice with SLOs? Is anybody using SLOs or exploring SLOs? Yeah.
We have failed to define them.
Define them? Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm on a project where we are helping the company build out observability of a large corporate LAN network.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a unique challenge for a lot of the examples you see that are more like a web application of some kind or like web services. So just getting good data,
Yeah.
metrics traces, has been a challenge.
Yep.
And then trying to create SLOs that mean anything is also a challenge, because
Yeah.
what is it measuring? Like,
what is it a proxy for? Because ideally you want, like, if someone is dropped from a Teams call, like that's a big indicator. If someone's having,
Yep.
bad latency, that's a big indicator. But how do you actually get that? Because that's like someone on their laptop, and who knows where.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, like network use cases and third-party use cases like Teams are always a challenge when it comes to SLOs to a fair degree. One thing I've been doing recently is like, if you have the conversation of this is the signal we want, go talk to the third party. Go talk to the solutions engineer on the observability platform and ask them how to get it. You know what I mean? Like, this is what we're trying to measure. Aren't other enterprises trying to measure this too? And kind of go at that angle.
You mean like from the service that's running on?
Yeah, so like, can you share which observability platform you're using to capture those?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Ultimately we use Grafana
Mhm.
for dashboarding, and we manually collect a lot of metrics into Victoria Metrics database,
Yeah.
time series database, but we're not like using like a telemetry tooling that automatically gathers.
You haven't like purchased you're using like Prometheus or something like that maybe.
Prometheus,
Yeah.
So like Victoria is like based on Prometheus.
Yeah, so like, I think this is a good example of reliability is hard. And it's an engineering problem. So sometimes you do have to get creative on identifying these signals and coming up with the right signals. If you have specific use cases, like glad to bounce ideas sometime. Like I have seen, like we just did a webinar with Collective, for example, who is like a observability platform for teams. And then we build SLOs off of their data. You know what I mean? So sometimes the investment required to even get the signals is maybe not even worth it. Or maybe you never know, maybe you can find something that's open source that you can start scraping and gathering in some fashion. Or another flaw that I see is people aim for perfection too much on their SLOs. Maybe you do have something that's good enough. Maybe there's an auxiliary signal that is close enough and the investment required to find the perfect one isn't worth it as well. So picking something, in my opinion, is better than picking nothing and iterating off of it. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's the nature of the beast. Like whenever third-party stuff gets involved, like Teams or measuring the reliability of ServiceNow that you've paid $5 million a year for, like there's a gap there. A lot of enterprises are kind of struggling with that from what I've seen. So, yeah.
Yeah, kind of following along that, like a lot of service suite Vantage use those third-party services, and
Yep.
kind of at the behest, like so GitHub.
You just gotta trust their SLAs, man.
And,
Yeah.
and so we can't, how do we do SLOs based on stuff that we don't control?
Yeah, I mean, GitHub's reliability has been great lately, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And we were told to move there and stuff, and so it's gonna, we can
Yeah.
already tell in the metrics without even an SLO that it's gonna be painful.
Yeah, I mean, GitHub's never thought about putting SLOs on GitHub itself, but yeah, it's worth the conversation to see what you can. Yeah, yeah,
And so and then the other problem we have is like, we manage some of the infrastructure on the CI/CD
Yep.
system. We can control that. We can monitor like traditional stuff. But then our customers, what their perspective is, if I build goes red, it's a problem, a breach of our SLA or whatever, or factory down because I can't get a release out. It's like, but you need to do some, is it caused because of engineering source code? Is
Yeah.
it an infrastructure issue? Is it GitHub.com
Yeah.
today? Or is it last month it was Ubuntu repositories being DDoS
Yep.
by Iraqis and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is there's so much out of your control when it comes to reliability, especially these days.
So what's your perspective, or what can you give for like managing or doing SLOs when you have those things you can't control?
It kind of goes back to, I think, your question a little bit, in just kind of the third-party topic in general. I have seen in practice, teams collaborate closely with those third parties to identify some metrics, because sometimes they'll expose APIs and stuff that you don't even know about, and you can tap into them and get some observability on those and put SLOs on them. Like I've literally seen people switch vendors because of this, and they proved with their SLOs that they weren't good enough. But the first part is think about the problem that way, and then act like an engineer and solve it that way. You know what I mean? Like think about how you can get the data. And,
yeah, one of the services was on-prem
Mhm.
and got sent out to software as a service, and now it's like they're
Yeah.
complaining bring it back on-prem because we ran it better than they did. But
Yeah.
again, we're only working on our instance. We're not them worrying about like 1,000 customers and their instances.
yeah, yeah,
I would think at a minimum it drives some conversations, right? Like if you're thinking about that from like a product perspective, like, hey, my product consists of things that I can control and things that I don't control, and if people aren't happy with the SLO of the product that I'm providing, at least it's going to drive some conversation. Like if this is
Yep.
important to you,
Yeah,
like,
I
you
like
need to
that.
do
Like
this,
we're not
this.
held accountable, but we have the data now
Yeah.
to go beat them over. The
exactly, yes.
And
Yep.
Especially at renewal time. Yeah, I like that.
Can I throw out, there's also something called parametric cloud insurance, outage insurance,
Mm-hmm.
that you can buy if, like, let's say our region went down one time and they'll pay out.
That's happened too in the last year. USC's going down for a day and a half.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah. What else? Yes.
I did read Alex's book. It's a good 600 pages.
It's good bedtime reading. Yeah.
But one of the things kind of related to that is it doesn't, if I understand correctly with SLOs, regardless of what your dependencies are part of your calculation for what you can burn.
Yep.
And so that is, sometimes the answer is there is no dependency on the market that
Mhm.
can do it better than this. And
Yep.
so we cannot provide it. And so that's just the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the lot of the point of SLOs is to drive the conversation on the cost of XYZ, like the cost of getting that extra 9. Yeah, if you want to go multi-cloud, the cost isn't worth it. But most of us are going to accept the reliability of most of our third parties are going to be reliable enough for us to do business. And that's why SLOs exist, so you can set reasonable targets and accept a certain level of failure. And if you don't hit those targets, it drives the conversation back to Todd's point. So yeah, it's a good call out.
The one thing I'd comment, I like your graph. It seems like a shift left when you have the alerting mindset, like on a network monitor.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your graphs showed about shifting left, like things were going downhill way over here.
Yeah.
But if you're in the mindset of an alert, like a networking alert or something like that, you're over here on the right-hand side, and you only get the alert when shit hits the fan,
Mhm.
versus when things are going downhill. So I think
Yep.
that's a really good
Yep.
eye-opening view of how to look at
Yeah, and I mean that's one mode of failure. Like that's not to say you're not going to have acute large incidents that just poof out of thin air. That it's so many contributing factors boil up to that one event to make it happen. You know what I mean? But the point is a lot of organizations are not thinking about reliability through that lens.
I
Yeah.
can think of lots of times
Yeah.
over the past 6 months where as we start digging into when we do get alert,
Mhm.
what's the first thing we do? We look up, bring up our dashboard, extend it out to 3 months, 9 months, and start seeing where things started going downhill.
Uh-huh.
Which is what, if we had your attitude that we would have found it earlier.
Yep.
Or worked on it earlier. But we use that to say, oh, on this date, this code got released. Or,
Yeah.
and things went downhill or something like that. Or this code change happened that caused things to go downhill.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that's not to keep plugging Noble 9, but we have lots of features that allow you to like annotate on the time series as well. So like changes that go in place or releases or incidents that are occurring that give you a little bit more context to what's happening in the environment for known events. There's a lot of unknown events that can drive down reliability as well. Like it's funny, like a lot of of people that I talk to when they're first getting into SLOs, they think that all incidents result from some change that happens. So they expect like a change to happen and then see the incident starting to happen. It's not what happens in reality with most incidents. There's so many factors that contribute to unreliable services at the end of the day, and changes is one of them.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
So,
So you
yeah.
do see the graph and there's something interesting
Yeah.
here. And then it just goes you down the path of, is it this? Is it this? Is
Yeah.
it this?
Yep. Yep.
And sometimes you don't find it, or find what it is.
Yeah, which is also a win because then you found a gap, and then you can decide if you want to fill it.
That's usually a gap is what it is.
Yeah.
You find out like, oh, we're not looking, and I always have a paradigm which is like, I don't know. If you look through all your logs, and you can't find the problem, you probably aren't logging it, or it's somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stuff.
Yep. Cool. What else? Anything?
How do you get to the point when you figure out this much is good? Because you talked about like perfect isn't achievable, that.
Yeah.
But also, if you're meeting your targets, your SLOs, at what point do you decide like, okay, I'm happy, we don't need to move it up and strive for more?
There's lots of different approaches to this problem, and let's call this problem, what target should I set on my SLO? 99 or 3 nines or 98. So going back to the G word a little bit, I have seen an approach where there are standards for latency and failure rate and availability, and you can just scale that across all SLOs, and then things get really interesting. Then you typically require like some sort of exception process if you're going to change your target, and you need to speak to why you can't hit that reliability target due to a third party or something, right? You accept that you're going to be a little more unreliable because the investment isn't worth it. Another approach, and Alex Yildago might frown upon me if I say this out loud, but using historical data, as a starting point, look at what the reliability was for the last month, see if there are incidents in there. If there's no incidents, maybe that's a good place to start if you think your customers are happy, right? It's an art. It can be an art. It just kind of depends. It's like this lever between scale and like empowering teams to own, and actually be motivated to think through what you just said. Because there's like the persona of, I want to do SLOs, I understand the value, I get it, we're going to iterate, we're going to have these discussions to land on a target that makes sense. Then there's the persona of the engineer that has no idea what SLOs are and was told to do SLOs by some central SRE team. And those are different personas that lead to different types of thinking when it comes to reliability targets. But yeah, that's a way to kind of think about reliability. I mean, just like pick something. Pick what you think it is, measure the reliability, then talk about it. Like that's how it happens in practice, or how it should happen in practice. So.
I think my question was similar. What I was thinking about, which is basically like you showed like say a P90, latency as with a threshold as your SLO target, and I was just wondering like, well, I mean, you can be 99.9% reliable if you just move that threshold up.
Yeah.
So it's like where do you
Exactly.
decide like, are you target to we want to get that threshold lower and lower, or do we want more reliability in terms of the number of nines? Or
Yeah.
like, which nine do you turn and when?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's where just using the data to drive those conversations can help you discuss the trade-offs of which levers to pull, whether that's investing more in reliability or changing the target or changing the threshold. That's why I had product people on that slide too, as well. Like if you can have them kind of give an opinion on what decent latency means to the customer and what that might mean, from a product lens, that's also nice to it's nice to have them in the room too for those types of conversations, especially as you get better at communicating about SLOs with product people that are less technical and executives and things like that. So, cool.
Any other questions for Dan? All right, thank you, Dan, for showing up.
Yep.
Next, just a reminder, next, let's clap. Lots of good questions. I like it when people ask lots of questions.
Me too.
Oh, good. next meeting, the 24th of June, DevOps Des Moines will have a roundtable on like, where are you at in the AI journey on your DevOps team, and discussion of like, what's, where you're at, compare notes with other teams, and share successes or challenges or insight. So, hope to see you there.
Cool.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Grab some